Three names: the Witch Lord, the Frozen Horror, the Ogre Lord. If you played HeroQuest in its heyday, you just pictured them instantly. You might even remember the way your stomach dropped when you realized your party wasn't ready for what was waiting behind that final door. These weren't just bosses, they were events, and they're still some of the best villain designs tabletop gaming has ever seen. Let's talk about why. Hey, I'm Bruce, and on this channel we explore tabletop RPGs, old school D&D, HeroQuest, Warhammer, and my own grim dark game, Echoes of the End. My goal is to help you make your games grittier, more immersive, and more fun, whether you're running them at the table or online. Every week I break down game mechanics, world building ideas, and design tricks you can use right away in your own campaigns. Back in the late 80s and early 90s, most board game final enemies were little more than stat bumps. Same sculpt, maybe a different color. Mechanically identical to regular enemies, just harder to kill. HeroQuest didn't settle for that. Its bosses were crafted with their own visual identity, their own mechanics, and, crucially, their own narrative build-up across multiple quests. By the time you faced them, you knew who they were, what they'd done, and why they needed to be stopped. That meant these bosses weren't just the last obstacle in a scenario, they were the reason for the whole scenario. The Witchlord campaign is a masterclass in how to do a Lich-style villain. He's not just a bag of hit points, he's a shadow over the entire game world. You hear about him before you see him. You fight his forces long before you face him. Mechanically, he's brilliant for the time, immune to certain attacks unless the heroes obtain a specific artifact, forcing the group to prepare and strategize. This wasn't just walk in and roll dice until he dies. You had to earn the fight. Visually, he's pure gothic menace. Skeletal face, flowing robes, towering crown, like he stepped straight out of a medieval tapestry of the apocalypse. The Frozen Horror campaign feels like a survival expedition. The icy setting alone makes it stand apart. Frozen caverns, snowfields, and a sense of isolation. Mechanically, it's brutal. High damage attacks, environmental hazards, and the introduction of mercenaries who can fight alongside the heroes. But even the mercs aren't enough to make it feel safe. Every step is attrition. Facing the Frozen Horror isn't just a boss fight. It's the climax of a gauntlet. A series of missions designed to grind you down so that by the time you reach him, you feel the weight of the journey. That's rare in board game design even now. Ogres in HeroQuest aren't just bigger orcs. They're an entirely different problem. High body points, huge attack dice, and the Ogre Lord himself leading from the front. Visually, he's a brute. Massive shoulders, cruel weapon, heavy armor. Mechanically, his campaign pairs him with multiple ogres, so you're never fighting him in a vacuum. The tension comes from being swarmed by units that can hit like trucks while the boss closes in. This is Boss's field general. He's dangerous not just because of his stats, but because he amplifies the threat of the entire board. All three of these HeroQuest bosses share a certain design DNA that's worth looking at closely. For starters, each one has a strong visual identity. These weren't just slightly larger or recolored versions of common enemies, they were instantly recognizable. The Lord's skeletal visage and regal crown, the Frozen Horror's hulking frame and icy menace, the Ogre Lord's sheer bulk and brutal weapon. Each figure was sculpted to tell you without a single rulebook line, this is someone dangerous. Even before you read their stats, you knew they weren't like anything else you'd faced. But looks alone don't make a great boss. The real magic was in the way their mechanics matched their story and setting. The Witchlord's immunity to normal attacks reinforced his undead overlord mystique and pushed you to hunt down the specific artifact that could harm him. The Frozen Horror wasn't just tough, he was surrounded by freezing hazards and encounters, making the cold itself part of his arsenal. The Ogre Lord brought overwhelming physical power and commanded other ogres, turning the fight into a battle for space and survival. Every rule tied back into who they were in the narrative. And then there's the way HeroQuest handled their place in the story. You didn't just stumble into these bosses by accident. The game made you hunt them quest after quest. Each appearance was built up with foreshadowing, skirmishes with their forces, and a slow unveiling of their threat. This gave the final confrontation weight. It wasn't another room, another enemy. It was the payoff to a journey. The designers understood that anticipation is part of the fun. Half the fear came before the first dice was rolled. By the time you reached that last chamber, the name alone, Witch Lord, Frozen Horror, Ogre Lord, carried its own gravity. You knew this was the moment everything had been leading to, and whether you won or lost, you were going to remember the fight. That sense of build-up, of a villain looming over the campaign, is something many modern games still struggle to capture, and is why these bosses linger in memory decades later. Modern tabletop and board game designers could still learn a lot from HeroQuest bosses. The first lesson is that a boss should be an event, not just a stat block. Too many modern designs treat the big bad as a slightly harder enemy you need to meet at the end of a mission. In HeroQuest, the boss wasn't just there to soak up more damage. Their arrival was the moment everything in the campaign had been building toward. Players felt the tension not because of a number on the page, but because the story and the gameplay had been pointing to that one encounter for hours, sometimes across multiple sessions. Another lesson is that the lead-up matters as much as the fight itself. You clashed with their forces, you navigated environments shaped by their influence, and gathered tools specifically to counter them. The journey was the setup. By the time you kicked open that final door, you already had a personal stake in the fight. Victory meant more than just flipping to the next page of the quest book. Finally, HeroQuest understood that the best villains have complete alignment between their visuals, mechanics, and narrative. The sculpt told you what they were about, the rules made you play differently against them, and the story gave you a reason to care. That trifecta is rare even today. When all three work together, you get more than a memorable encounter. You get a villain who lives rent-free in the players' minds for decades. And that's the kind of design goal every game, old or new, should aspire to. The Witch Lord, the Frozen Horror, and the Ogre Lord remain standouts in tabletop villain design because they weren't just big enemies. They were characters. They had presence, they had personality, and purpose. That's why we remember them decades later. Now I want to hear from you. Which HeroQuest boss gave you the biggest headache? Or if you're new to the game, which one looks the most dangerous? Drop it in the comments. And if you like this deep dive into HeroQuest design, hit subscribe because next time we're talking about the monsters that were better than you remember.